Hey, so I'm going to start trying to work on some more of these videos. I've got notes here. That's what you see glowing. Maybe I can turn the brightness down a little bit. Would that help? Yeah, so now you can't see it. I just can't see hardly what I'm reading. But anyway, so I've been talking with some of you guys about how I'm enjoying making these videos, and um, I thought maybe do something different. Normally it's me cooking or doing something goofy, but I thought focus on something that I've been thinking about a lot lately, failure. I know it's not a fun topic, but I think every one of us have experienced failure, whether it be in jobs, relationships, um, you know, being able to Kobe the shot into the trash can. I mean, it's something as simple as that, or something as, big as, the job, relationship, goals, things like that. We're all working on goals, things that we can make better in our life. And I think, we've all, at this point, I think each of us have talked to each other about the fact that we failed. There's Goofy back there, about the fact that we failed on something. And so I was looking at it, and thinking about it. I had a conversation with my mother the other day, and everybody knows talking to your mom is the best. Um, and I was just talking to her about some of the stuff that you guys have been doing, because I'm super proud of what everybody's been achieving. And one thing that she said, because as most of y'all know, I was going through some pretty rough patches, was, I got the quote here. She said, "Finding your knees showed you how to showed you how to back up and boost others up. Finding your knees showed you how to, get down on the ground and boost other up." And I butchered that quote the first time, but I thought about it, and she's right. And for me, this year has been the toughest year of my life. Losing people, failing, a lot of failure. That's why it's on my mind. It hasn't been a fun year, really, but I'm starting to understand the value of that failure. I think one thing that I need to be clear about is it has kicked my ass. I have not enjoyed it. I don't think anyone enjoys failing, but it's about getting back up. It's about, as Mom said, falling to your knees is allowing you to figure out what helps you get back up. And for me, a lot of that is helping others get back up. But I started looking into failure, and there's always a lot of quotes about it. The Michael Jordan one that most sports fans have heard, or even really not sports fans, but just anybody who knows who Michael Jordan is. He said, I can accept failure. Everyone fails at something, but I can't accept not trying." And I was thinking about that, and I was like, that's a great quote. Like that, that's something that you can look at and you can say, oh yeah, I'm not gonna give up. I'm not gonna quit trying. Failure is not the answer. But we hear that from MJ after we know that he's won multiple championships, multiple MVPs. He's the best NBA player of all time, arguably the greatest athlete of all time. So we're seeing it on the back end, and that doesn't really help us when we're in the midst of failure, when we're actually struggling with failure. I think that quote, just throwing that quote to a friend or to ourselves, really is kind of a disservice to them, in that when you're failing, we have this visceral, painful response to it. It's horrible. It doesn't feel good. No one wants to be rejected. No one wants to come up short. No one wants to have, a mistake. We all want to do the best we can. And we feel less than whenever we fail. So one thing I want to challenge you all to do, and something I'm challenging myself to do, is embrace our failures. And that sounds like masochism almost, but I think if we really look at it, there's a lot of value in kind of setting in our failure for an appropriate amount of time, not dwelling in it, but to look into it and to really think about, what is this teaching me? Because I think failure is one of the greatest teachers we'll find in our lives. And I've got three big points, and then I'm also going to connect it to the Avengers in the back. Hey, Captain America. Because y'all know I love pop culture, and I think it helps explain things a little bit. So the first thing I think we should recognize about failure is we're not the best at everything. You have things you're good at. You have things that you're really great at, but you're not going to be the best at everything. And I know that's extremely simple. That's almost something we would tell a child whenever a child gets upset because they can't do something. But I don't think we always fully keep that in mind. I think, when you look at that and you say, I'm not always going to be the best at this. I'm not always going to play this song properly if I'm playing it on guitar. I'm not always going to do the best thing at work. I'm not always going to be the best father, the best husband, the best son, the best brother. I think that allows us to understand when we fail, it's okay. You know what I mean? Like, we're going to mess up. I think, there's a song by Blues Traveler, there's no such thing as a failure who quits trying. That's another one of those kind of quotes that doesn't really, give you a lot of help. But I think failure has because it's such a potent drug almost, it has a tendency to allow us to be like, God, I'm such a failure, I've messed up, I'm never going to get it right. And I think that is a very dangerous place to be. So I think keeping in mind, obviously having a value for yourself, a confidence for yourself, but also knowing that, like, I am never, this may surprise y'all, I'm never going to be an NBA player. You know what I mean? But there are other things that I'm very good at that I can use to build me up, to find that self-value that we all need to have. So I'm not looking for others to validate me. So, first things first, let's remember that we're not going to be the best at everything. Second is you will be okay. It plays into that a little bit. It's tough. It's certainly tough for me. I want to be the best. But also, I think we need to realize that even though we may mess up, even though we may not be the best at something, we're going to wake up tomorrow. I think it's funny. There's a lot of songs about, like looking back, like, oh, if I hadn't had all these bad things happen, I wouldn't be with the person I'm with, or I wouldn't have, become the person I've become. And there's a lot of, like, truth in that. I mean, I think we could all agree, if you're looking at, if you've gotten to a place where you're content with where you are in that aspect of your life, if you're content with your marriage, if you're content with your family, if you're content with who you are in your career, your career position, then I think you can look back at the failures with a bit of 20/20 vision at that point and say, oh yeah, that door that closed and slammed right in my face and made me feel so bad, that was what helped me build up to the future. There was a study I read today about some scientists who they had looked at scientists who had gotten grant funding, and the ones who had gotten it in the first 5 years had done really well. They continued to get grant funding because once you got it, you kept going. The ones who didn't get it and were denied, there was like a 5 to 10% amount of people who just kind of quit at that point. But the other scientists, they ended up continuing, and then 10 years down the road, it ended up that most of them had higher, like, I guess, approval ratings or higher credibility ratings on the studies they were performing, and they ended up getting the same amount of grant money that the other ones who had succeeded before them got. But it kind of indicated that there's some value in actually maybe making you better if you fail up front and you continue on. Those lessons that you learn allow you to become better at your chosen craft, your chosen relationship, whatever you're looking at. So I think we want to remember that you will be okay. Next, you need to let go. This one is extremely difficult, but you cannot be in control at all times. You can't make someone love you. You can't make someone give you a job, even though you may be the best candidate in your eyes. You can't make your friend make a change. You can do what you can do. I think we need to look at our own lives. Think about this. That is the place where you exhibit the most control that you could have, potentially, is in your own life and the things that you do. And you can do something and still not have it work out the way you want it. So whenever you start putting these other variables in, these other people, these other systems that you definitely don't have control over, there's no way you're going to be able to control that, and there's no way the outcome's always going to be what you want. So you need to let go. You need to understand that while this, failure may hurt, and it may not be something that you wanted, but you thought you could stop it, it's not going to break you. In fact, it's going to be valuable to you later on. I'm approaching 10 minutes. I'm going to try to keep this short. I'm a talker. So we're going to get into the Avengers Endgame stuff that I wanted to. I'm going to try to keep it fairly quick. We're going to just do like a surface level review of it and what I'm wanting. there's the quote that I think everybody knows if you watch the movie where Thanos, whenever the big three, Thor, Captain America, and Iron Man, come up to him and he says, "You could not live with your own failure, and where did that bring you? Back to me." So they try to beat him, and he succeeds, snaps, half the world's gone, and all three of the big three characters of Marvel, of course, because they're the focus, they all kind of internalize it and take that failure to stop him, and really it defines their character for the next movie. And I think that's something that I really want to look at. How they handle their failure and how it leads in the end to their eventual success. So let's start with Thor. Honestly, he started off as one of the most boring characters in the whole thing, but he ends up becoming one of the best. He loses everything. He loses like brother, sister, family, mother, father. Like literally, if you're related to Thor or if he cares about you, you're pretty much given a death certificate at that point. So as like the strongest Avenger, he's a god. He ends up, being the one who puts the most responsibility on himself to take out Thanos. And at the end of Infinity War, he ends up, hitting him with the axe right in the chest. But he doesn't aim for the head. I'm sure we all remember that quote. And Thanos is able to snap, and they fail. Like that's the end. Like we all think, oh crap, that's how the movie ends. It's a big bummer. So you go into what happens to Thor. He basically becomes an alcoholic. He becomes depressed. They made a bit of it with the fat Thor and all that. But what we need to look at is how, and it relates back to number one, that you're not the best at everything. He put so much pressure on himself to be the one who could solve the issue, who could save the day. And he lets the fact that he fails completely control his self-worth. So if you look at, what state he's at, I think there's a place that a lot of us get because we fail and we were like, oh crap, I was supposed to be the one who could handle this. I was supposed to be the best. And we struggle to get out of that. And I really I'm going to be reading a little bit of it, but I really love the conversation he has with his mom. It's the movie magic. They're able to time travel and go back. But there's some real awesome stuff there. He's telling her what happened, and he says, I was just standing there, some idiot with an axe. His mom says, Frigga, I think it's Frigga, says, idiot, no. A failure, absolutely. And he's like, well, that's a little harsh. And she says, but do you know what that makes you? Just like everyone else. And she's giving him very, very valuable advice there. And I love that he even says, he's still got that mindset, I'm not supposed to be like everyone else, though, am I? And she says, everyone fails at who they're supposed to be, Thor. The measure of a person, of a hero, is how well they succeed at being who they are. And I think that's something that failure, we have these expectations of ourselves, and sometimes we don't actually even fail. I think we just have such high expectations of ourselves that when we don't meet them, we consider it to be a failure, but plenty of other people would consider it to be a success, or at least, just a normal day. And I love that, immediately after that, he puts the hand out and just waits for a second. They play it for laughs. But then he gets the hammer, and there's this pure joy on his face. He gets Mjolnir, and he's like, I am still worthy. And it's like he's being validated. He's getting that self-validation. He gets it in a tangible way. But we need to have those moments, those hammer-grabbing moments in our own life where we can just say, no, I am worthy, and I don't have to let this failure define me. Now, the next one I want to talk about is Iron Man. And he, obviously he's the one at the end of the day that ends up saving the day. But I think what's interesting about him is his failure, he ends up making the best of it, of any of them. Him and Pepper go off. They have a family, the I Love You 3000 and all that. And so, for 5 years, he's doing really well. And it's constantly, Cap and Black Widow and all of them come to him and they want him to help with time travel, and he just says no. What happens with Iron Man is something that it's a very nuanced way of looking at failure, and that it's not a good way to handle it, because he closes into himself and what he can control, which is his family, and he doesn't go to his calling, what he is designed to do. We know in the end it's his self-sacrifice that saves the day, the one in X amount of whatever number that is, the outcomes that is the right outcome. However, I think that's something that we need to be mindful of when we fail. There's a tendency when we fail, because of how painful it is, that we don't want to experience it again, so we retreat into ourselves. And that way we can control we can never let that failure hurt us again. And then we're denying our calling, because in order to do what you're supposed to do, you're going to fail. You're going to have stumbling blocks along the route, but you can't just let that throw you off the track. And I love whenever he first comes back after they fail, on the planet, Thanos leaves and he comes back and he finds out everybody's been snapped. Whenever they finally get him back after him floating out in space, he goes to Cap. And they've had their whole dynamic of fighting with each other and grinding, and he's like, I said we would lose. You said we'd do that together. Well, we lost, and guess what? You weren't there. And I love that because I think one thing that we need to focus on, especially with this group, is that we're going to fail each other. We're not going to be the best friends to each other, but we can't hold that against each other. Now, he clearly does, and what the movie does a great job of is it shows that while they can be successful on their own, Cap and Iron Man, in the end, they really need to be together to have the ultimate success, to beat Thanos. And they don't get those final outcomes that they really, they don't fulfill their purpose until they're able to reunite and get back together and overcome that failure. So, the next one is Captain America, and I'm going to try to keep this under 20 minutes. I got a timer showing me 16 minutes. And he's my favorite of the bunch. I love him. You guys can obviously tell. But he pretty much is in denial. He doesn't accept failure. He just doesn't. He has the support group that he does where he tells them, I'm going to read this quote because it's pretty good, and it also speaks a lot to what happens with him. He tells one of the guys is talking about going on a date and having some rough time, and he says, that's great. He said he had a rough time, but he's glad he did it, and they're going to go out again. He says, that's great. You did the hardest part. You took the jump. You didn't know where you were going to come down, and that's it. Those little brave baby steps that we got to take to try and become whole again, try and find purpose. I went in the ice in 45, because Captain America got frozen in ice, right after I met the love of my life. Woke up 70 years later. You got to move on. You got to move on. The world is in our hands. It's left to us, and we got to do something with it. Which there's a lot to read there. But what's interesting is, the next scene we see with him, he's going to Black Widow, and he's saying, I keep telling everybody we should move on and grow, and some people do, but not us. And that's the problem with Cap and how he handles his failure. There's value in not giving up, obviously. You got to persevere. But he doesn't accept the failure. He doesn't take what he's telling people to do, which is make the most of what happened. Once a failure happens, it's done. Say you don't get a job and you wanted that job. Once it's gone, once you don't get the job, that's it. You got to move forward. You got to do something else. You can't just, be like, oh, God, I didn't get it, But you also, and I think this is good for our group, we can't just tell each other, I can't say, hey, you need to keep working, you need to keep going and not do it myself, because then I'm not living by my code. I'm not living by what I'm not practicing what I preach. And I think, and keep it, kind of short. What I really like is that quote of Thanos, you couldn't live with your failure, and you came. What happened and brought it back to you, or brought it back to me. But by not living with the failure, but once they finally process it, each of them kind of do it in their own way. Once they all go through it, they're able to come together and defeat him. And it ends up, Iron Man ends up dying. I'm not going to propose that any of us do that, self-sacrifice, but it's about meeting those. Living our purpose, understanding that we're not always going to be the best, and then also leaning on each other. That's key. You've got to find that self-value, but also you got to understand that life's a yin and yang. There's going to be times when you're able to find that value for yourself and you can give it to yourself, but there's also going to be times that you're not, and you need to be able to lean on your brothers, to lean on your family, to lean on your friends, lean on your significant others, and let them help you, because we'll go back around to that quote, there's no such thing as a failure who quits trying. Once you are able to actually live with failure, those quotes can do you a lot of good. But it's until you are able to actually get through that middle process, the chunk that no one really talks about. That's the key. Unless you can do that, you're not going to be able to use those quotes that are like, keep going, keep trying, you're going to make it one day. They're not going to mean anything to you because you're not doing it with purpose. You're not looking at and evaluating what happened, seeing that maybe you need to change directions, maybe you need to do something differently in the future, maybe you need to go down a different path, maybe it's not that you're failing in what you should be doing. Maybe this is something in the universe telling you that this really just isn't what you should be doing. Maybe you shouldn't be continuing this road, you know? Maybe this is like, you know, if you want to talk about God, maybe this is God smacking you upside the head saying, no, 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 turn around, you missed a turn over there, you know? So, I don't know what you all think about this. I'm going to try to, you know, I'm going to try to do some more of these. I enjoyed this. It's 20 minutes. I don't know how I'm going to post it. I'm going to figure that out. I'm going to try to put it in the Discord or at least in the group chat for you guys or somewhere. But yeah, you know, definitely let's talk about it and let's geek out about, you know, Avengers anyway, if we don't talk about the other stuff. But, you know, let's talk about failure this week and kind of how we can handle it.